welcome. So today I am going live with Danielle, and I hope I am pronouncing her name correctly. I know she has it spelled in a unique way, or emphasized in a unique way anyway.
Yay!
And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. This has been like a long time coming, and like even as I was like getting ready this morning, I'm like, I already can feel like this is gonna happen more than one time. Like something about the
Yes.
feeling that I was getting as we were hopping on. So I'm excited to see what comes through, what comes through in our sacred space that we're creating here. Yeah, and what message is meant to come through for everybody that's watching. So thank you those who are watching live and those who are watching the replay. I see we've got 3 people viewing, and right now I don't know if one of them includes me, but
Perhaps. But I do
perhaps.
feel like this was people liked what we were talking about in the little intro. So there were a few people who were like, "Yes, I want to watch this." Whether they'll be here live is a different story. However, I know this will be like you said. I mean, this is a juicy conversation. It's very broad and very deep, and I think, like you said, it's been a long time coming. And I want to first share why I reached out to you. Um, and so, first of all, if you all don't follow Danielle, I'm sure some of you do because you might end up finding this on her page. But if you don't follow her, she's probably one of easily the wisest people that you'll find on Facebook. Just totally embodied, already there. Okay. She's just one of the few people that you see walking with really high integrity and maturity in this space. And you can more or less trust most anything she says. And I share that because I think that's important and I think that that's rare. And I think it's a gift. So I want to make sure that I introduce you in that way, and let people know who they're seeing here. And then the reason I reached out to you was because so a little while back, there was a time, a short time frame where you were receiving some heat or some flack in the online space for some of your thoughts and for some of your opinions. And what I loved about your shares at the time is that you were owning and embodying such an empowered perspective that I feel like it felt dangerous for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people didn't fully understand. And so I reached out to you at that time and we had a brief conversation, and I was throwing some questions your way around like victimhood and victimization and trauma even. And I remember we had a pretty decent discussion on that, and then we were like, okay, maybe this is a conversation we can have in front of other people and let other people be a part of this conversation too. So I wanted to introduce that because, yeah, I absolutely love your perspectives, and I think I'm still in a place actually where I might have more inquiries within myself than I do final answers. So I want to share that too as a disclaimer on my end. This is something that I'm still navigating and learning and inquiring about. And when it comes to ego and that becoming a limit for us, our stories, our narratives, the things we subscribe to, the labels that we subscribe to, the victimization and or oppression that we subscribe to, and how much that can limit us. And it doesn't mean that we bypass all of that either. We own it, and that's a part of the process. But eventually, there is an opportunity to also release it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. So I just wanted to open with that and see what any thoughts that come up for you as I share some of that.
This is such a big topic.
It is.
It's so good to, yeah, I just love that we're having a live conversation about this because I know that we've like commented on each other's posts and we've been having this conversation like through text, but to like really be having it real time, it feels really special. I'm like, ooh, goosebumps. But yeah, I mean, it's really complex and multidimensional, and um I don't know. I mean, can I just like kind of dive in, like
Yeah,
just
dive
generally?
into whatever you want. I took a
So
bunch of notes myself just so I had some talking points and could find my own flow. But I mean, like those are just sitting there, and I think we should find our flow. And then if we need
okay,
talking points, we'll go there.
okay. So I did receive some just like how would I say, like criticism for maybe bypassing for these like beliefs that I have, for being, for focusing on sovereignty, for focusing on liberation, for focusing on these things. And the thing is, and I'm very conscious of this too, is that we're all at different phases of evolution. Like, different individuals, depending on what you incarnated into, what you experienced throughout your life. Like, there's so many different aspects that contribute to our evolution, and like, it's not better to be further along, or even further along is even a tricky way to word it, but different perceptions come as we evolve in different ways. And um this has been something that I've been conscious of for my whole life. I think just like who I am, how I was born, I have been like kind of processing the traumas and the, oppression. And I mean, I really like to identify it as internalized oppression, because there comes a point where it's not the external forces that are really imposing any limitations, where really it's like this belief that we've inherited from kind of systems, if you will, and shifting that belief that's inside of us can actually give us the power to kind of go beyond where we are, or where we feel limited, or where we feel oppressed. So yeah, so like I said, my whole life I've been really sitting with these things. I mean, I grew up in an all-white community, as the only Black woman, so I feel like Black girl, I kind of feel like I mean, not my whole life, but like initially growing up from like a young age, I kind of had this awareness of like otherness, and that thread was woven through my awareness and observing the dynamics of life, of people, of humanity. And I've always had these questions, these questions. So I've been feeling into this for a long time. Whereas I feel that some are with like, last year and Black Lives Matter and all these things that are coming up again, especially for like our generation, around race and around trauma, in general, are something that I've been like feeling into for a while. So people are maybe just kind of feeling the effects, in ways that maybe I felt sooner in life, or the understanding the dynamics that are going on, um, now for some people, whereas I experienced it earlier. I mean, and some other people experienced it earlier too, but I can just speak for me, and the perspective and the experience that I bring, and why my voice might be different than the common narrative, right now. Um, so yeah, so that's something to kind of begin with, to put out there. And I think it's beautiful that we're all at different places, on this evolutionary journey, on this, yeah. And if anything, I've come to really claim that as part of, my soul's purpose, to be an evolutionary, revolutionary catalyst, to like be the one who is maybe saying the things that aren't as popular yet, or that aren't as, and popular is a funny word, but aren't as like at the forefront yet, but like there aren't common knowledge yet, I would say. So yeah, so I think I'll pause for just a moment and see how that lands with you. And if anybody has any questions that's watching, please ask. I feel like I actually really love questions, um, you know, but I'm also open to just go on.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you shared that, in terms of, there is this developmental process, we can say, or this journey or pilgrimage we all go on, and that all stages to that journey are valid. And you still, though, might find yourself one place at one time, and then find yourself in another place at another time. And all places are valid. And sometimes it's not linear. You might go right back to where you came from, where you started, and have to move your way up again. And so I like that you first pointed that out too, that while some people might be encountering some of these inquiries and this discovery within themselves for the very first time, some of us have been doing it for 5 years, some 10, some 20, some their whole lives. So it's
Mhm.
no wonder that we all, embody and operate from different perspectives. And I think that's all, it's all welcome here too. And I'm glad that she, shared. We invite, of course, conversation, insights, reflection, questions. This is very much a roundtable discussion, for everyone's viewpoints to be heard and to be shared. Something that I also wanted to point out that you brought up was, and I've been exploring sort of the difference, and I posted on this like maybe last week, and you commented, the difference between, say, victimization and victimhood. And some of the things that I've discovered with that are, you know, in the human condition, victimization is, I don't want to say assumed, dare I say such a thing, but victimization happens. This is the human condition. Safety is not assured. Whether there's a tiger around the corner or who knows what, or a natural disaster, it's here. That's a part of the human condition. It's inarguable. Uh, it's likely something that is assumed, right? When we incarnate
Yeah.
here, we decide to be here. With that said, victimhood tends to be a totally different experience, such that it's more of like this identification, like this belief. When you really look at it, we can take something like a one-time event or even a multi-time event with victimization, and then we create a belief or a belief system out of that. Usually we've internalized that event to make it mean something about us,
Yes.
and then that's when we hold on to it. So to give people an example, like, because I was thinking, how can I bring this down to earth for people, like in an everyday way?
Mm-hmm.
I go through my experience in motherhood where if I'm in my empowered adult, we'll say, right, because we have our empowered adult on the inside, our inner child, our inner victim, so on and so forth. When I'm in my empowered adult perspective, things like, no big deal, they kind of slide off my back. Like I'm in the moment, I'm present. If something comes up, it's immediately processed, it's let go, right? So we can say victimization happens. My son might punch me in the face, which, when we're wrestling or something, he might say something really mean. I hate you, mommy, but it's no big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's only when I step into this belief system of, I'm being victimized, or something is wrong, or something is bad, or I don't like this, judgments, beliefs, that I'm finding, oh, wait, now it's a really hard day in motherhood. Now I'm holding on to everything that's happening. Now I'm making it mean something about me. Now I'm making it mean something about him. Now I'm looking for all the evidence in my reality that tells me I'm a victim and I will continue to be a victim and everything is wrong in the world. And so I think that's an important distinction, because a lot of us, in terms of mass humanity or mass consciousness, we're operating in that space of identifying or subscribing to victimhood without even realizing. Without even
Exactly.
realizing. So I don't know if anything comes up for you on that topic, but I wanted to throw that your way, especially because you had brought up, it's really a belief
Yeah.
that keeps these things lodged.
Yes. Yes. Oh, you are like so on point with the way that you define and describe everything. And yes, it's the what I am always trying to the point I'm trying to bring through always is that internalized oppression is a term that I learned. I actually learned that in university in gender, women's studies, and African American studies programs. Like, the part of the theory was internalized oppression, meaning that if some, like, let's say the systems are racist, there is somehow a consent to the belief that you have to go along with the system itself, which in some ways we do have to. In some ways we don't have a choice, and we do have to um, conform or consent to some of these rules. But then there are other ways that I feel like we're not aware of, that we have subscribed or agreed to follow these sets of beliefs about you have to work harder, for example, like for Black women, you have to work harder to succeed, to prove yourself. But like for me, for example, that means that, okay, I want to prove myself within this system. This is like a system that's been colonized, where the consciousness is colonized and like conditioned or programmed in a certain way. And yes, it's true, people on an unconscious, subconscious level maybe do have biases, against people that, have different skin colors or whatever, because of the kind of collective narrative that's somehow been conditioned. But we can reclaim like our, we can like deprogram from that and really identify like, okay, where did I like somehow agree to go along with these things that I actually don't have to go along with, because we think we have to go along with them to be safe, to be, to succeed, to whatever. But like at one point, perhaps that was true in time in history where there was no choice. You had to conform to survive. But now we're at a place where we don't, where actually, you know, as a black woman, I can succeed and I can thrive, um, without having to prove myself, you know, and without having to like get all the degrees at one point that I thought I needed to have to be, you know, respected, to get, you know, really high grades, to be competitive for the workplace, and et cetera, et cetera. Like now, you know, so much more is available to us, as far as how we can create a business or, you know, generate income, that really some of the hustle or the pressure to conform to something is not as like much of a survival need, if that makes sense. So that's one example I think that can maybe also bring it down to earth for people, and what I try to communicate. Now, I love how you said that you can hold two things simultaneously. You can be sovereign and independent from these, you know, from these narratives that, you know, that people maybe are still kind of wrapped up in. And you can also be grieving still from the experience of people and systems that are treating people unfairly. But that doesn't mean that we are limited. Like, and I mean, in some ways, sure, we're limited, but the beauty is we're here to go beyond the ways that we're limited, to expand and to evolve. Like, we're here to think outside of the box, to find ways to be liberated, sovereign, and empowered beyond the narratives, beyond the limitations. And I think victimhood, like you said, is where we actually subconsciously, I think oftentimes where we get stuck and don't see beyond, and have kind of like, it's almost like an unconscious way to, for the ego to kind of stay small in some ways sometimes. And there was something else that you said that I wanted to address. So yeah, so it's important to be mindful of like the kind of nuances between like, okay, well, where are the limitations, and actually I'm here to go beyond the limitations, and the limitations don't actually say anything about me, although they want me to think that they, you know, the, which they may or may not even actually be a real thing. It is, I mean, okay, that's where the bypassing kind of gets in, but like, they is giving someone else the power to determine. Whereas, yes, in some ways they do have power, but there are ways that we still have our own power, always, 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 to be sovereign, to be liberated. And if anything, we're it's a blessing to go beyond those things. It's like a evolutionary blessing to like have the impetus to like, okay, like what's more, what else is possible, what's my role in like bringing forth something else. And but the trauma is very, very real as well, because when we don't know this, we inherit and consent to these things. And it's not until we realize that we've consented to them that like the damage, there's damage that's already been done, there's trauma, you know, there's, oh, what was it that you said? Oh my gosh, as I'm talking, it keeps popping up. But there was one point that I felt was really, really important to address about, oh, it's another thing that helps with the trauma and that helps with the deprogramming and like healing to be able to get unstuck, is to realize that victimization is a universal thing. it does not, no individual is exempt. No individual is like more blessed or more, you know, victimized. I mean, that's going to be controversial. I think that I said that, but the truth is it's the human experience to experience victimization. Okay, maybe some people have experienced more pain or struggle or hardship in different ways in their lives. And that doesn't say anything about them as an individual as far as like their they're a worse person or they deserve it or the, you know what I mean? It's just like there's some people who are here to overcome what seems like greater odds and heal from more intense traumas, but it's a universal aspect of the human experience. And so for me, it's helped to not feel like bad for myself on a like personal individual level because of things that I've experienced in my life, because my father wasn't present when I was young, you know, because or growing up, and I didn't have a strong father figure, not because I'm a black woman in the, you know, in America that has a history of racism and all that. Like um I can be angry about those things and I can feel all the feels in a very healthy way and feel frustrated about it. And I can not let it become something that's disillusioning me or feeling like more like of like, oh, I have it, you know, we have it harder than everybody else, which it's, I mean, it is, yes, important to acknowledge that we do, but like to like kind of like have any sort of resentment around that or anything that like lingers for like a longer amount of time feels to me like it's a misplacement of energy. Like again, it happens and that it's part of the process to be there and to feel that, and it's healthy. But then there comes a point, like you've said and like we've said, that it becomes a limitation. And I mean, for me, the whole purpose of the human experience is to come up against these opportunities to like almost like break through. You know what I mean? Like there's you know all the anger, the trauma, there's the stages of grieving that are so important to be had, and at the same time, it's part of evolution to experience these things, at least at this moment here on earth, at least for humanity right now. It's part, sorry, the sun is in my eyes. It's part of the process. You know, it's a universal law almost that we are going to experience pain and joy and sadness and light and dark and night and day and up and down and all these things. So I feel like there's like an importance to sit with the emotions to be able to heal. There's an importance to like understand the places where we actually didn't realize we're taking on beliefs that are limiting, like, and like narratives for like how things are and how things will always be and what's right and wrong and good and bad and you know what's fair. Um and the third piece is to then sit with the feeling of how this is part of, this is like an essential part of the process of expansion and evolution as human beings. So you know those three things, I feel like, you know, there's like this kind of dance and it's like a alchemical process to like, you know, and like you said, it's not always linear. You know, like sometimes you'll feel the clarity and you'll see the possibility and you'll see beyond, and then some days you'll still feel, you know, the trauma in the body from, you know, experiences that have been, you know, harmful. So yeah, how about, what do you think about that?
Such a beautiful and thorough response too. I absolutely love everything that you shared. There were so many things. There's no way to point out all the nuggets, but one of the things that I really love that you were speaking to, I felt like was, almost all truth appears to be paradoxical, at least in the third dimension, right? So it's like we have these limitations, and yet we are meant to break through them to our limitlessness. Yes, there is pain and suffering, and yet we can always choose a more empowering perspective and support ourselves to heal and grow from that. And so I think that's the piece where both sides are valid, both sides are real, and yet let's just say everything was true. Every story our egos had, humanity has, our mass consciousness has, all of it was true. At this point, then, we can either decide to continue to perpetuate and maintain those stories, narratives, programs, experiences, all of which were real, or at least most of which were real and true, at least at one time or another. Otherwise, we wouldn't have internalized it. Whether it's been inherited, whether it's been internalized in our particular lifetime, it was true at one point in time. So let's just say it's all true. Well, then we get to decide as a humanity, or at least as an individual, does this continue to be true? Am I going to sustain, maintain, and perpetuate this very limiting story that implies my smallness forever, that I am limited forever? And I think the more, and this is where I feel like some things I do get nervous about this conversation. I have to be completely honest, because dare I say something dangerous, but this does feel like a safe space here. I was like, I don't know. But I feel like the pendulum kind of went from one space of, it was, probably more of a bypassing nature, where it was all mindset, and it was, there are no victims, and it was, oppression isn't real, and that pendulum has now, it's swung to the other side, where it's like, everything is trauma and pain and suffering, and I've been victimized. And it's like, okay, first of all, two sides of the same coin. Let's bring this to a middle path here, the middle ground, and recognize that these are both realities. For me, the most empowering place to be is recognizing the very real truth to victimization. We've talked about it a few different times here, as well as my choice, my opportunity to choose a more empowering perspective, reality, life, belief system, value system, so on and so forth. Because I feel like at this point we've sort of gotten to, at least in the main circles, or like what we hear, what's the trends and views that are popular. We hear a lot about um, trauma informed approaches, and I'm all for that, having been in the field of psychology as a professional for almost 20 years. And yet a lot of it hasn't lately felt like trauma informed. It's been more of like, let's justify our own victimization. Let's justify this and reinforce it and affirm it and beat it to death and make sure that we're victims forever. And I'm like, whoa, well, maybe let's not go that far, guys. Like, let's, let's assume that these things happen, and that's a part of us. And some of us, to be completely honest, may carry some of that pain or trauma for years, if not a lifetime, or many more. However, the more we can create space and flexibility around those stories or those belief systems or ego structures or whatever, that's where we're going to find they can start to dissipate. We continue to justify and affirm those old stories as true as they were at one point. We continue to identify with them and make them our own. If it becomes who we are, like you spoke to, right? When it starts to become who we are, the more we go down that path, the more limited we become, as opposed to if we just start even just asking ourselves questions. Well, is that true? And does it have to be true? And will it continue to be true? And is that really me? Why am I owning that story? Whatever kind of questions or space, whether it's meditation or whatever we can create for ourselves, we start to find that those things start dissolving. They start kind of leaving into the ether, or whatever is happening energetically, such that we aren't held back or bound to those old stories, to those old identities and limitations. And so I think part of, I know my work, and it sounds like your work as well, is helping people find that common ground. We can validate humbly that suffering is universal, and pain is a part of the path of humanity in our own lives, and that emotion is the great equalizer. You said that no one's is better or worse, up or down, left or right, or whatever. And although people's trauma might look very different and look more extreme, and those things are real, emotion, though, remains the same. We're all on an emotional journey at the end of the day. It's the great equalizer. It's the one thing that doesn't make me different from, Sam Heughan from Outlander or Britney Spears. Okay. I mean, that's the one thing that makes us all the same. So yeah, I think when we start recognizing that there's definitely room for our trauma and our victimization, and there might be parts of us that remain in that place and ideally not, but probably, for a good amount of time, we can begin to create space uh, for more empowering perspectives, but also embodiment to come through. Because that embodiment, the way you hold yourself, carry yourself, the way you feel, um, all of that's going to change too. The more you just create space around those old stories or narratives or programs around victimhood and oppression. Mostly it's ourselves, like you said, the inner piece of how are we making ourselves victims? How are we perpetuating our own victimhood? How are we carrying on our own limitations? Why would we? What do we do? The part of us that's an inner victim, and this will be the last thing that I say here, really wants it to stay. And I know that because when I feel it, when I feel victimized, when someone's hurt me, rejected me, abandoned me, attacked me, all these words, they've abused me, all those things. Even I feel like my son sometimes abuses me. I'm like, I can go into that whole victimhood story of up, and it's like I almost want to affirm my own victimhood. I'm like, why? And there's no logic to it. So that's a very natural response. And I think that's important for people to recognize and validate, like, hey, that's the part, that's our inner child in there. It's not as, we haven't maybe matured that part of ourselves, brought it to an empowered adulthood, which we can bring all those parts to ourselves into empowered adulthood, and that's important to remember. But there might be a part of us that wants to affirm and justify our victimhood until our death. But I think how I want to operate is choose more empowering perspectives and choose something that is more limitless from my personal experience. And I would hope that could be the case for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that I think that we all on some level want to evolve and want to choose the more empowering path, but it's a matter of awareness. Like it's a very tricky, sneaky thing, the like you said, the ego kind of like that aspect of the ego, the shadow or the unintegrated parts or the wounded parts, it usually stems from like a core wound, and um, somehow, yeah, like it wants to live, like it wants to be there. And maybe it will just be there, but it's like being aware of it is like where the empowerment and the sovereignty starts to kick in, when it's not controlling you, when you're just more aware of it. And I think the more and more aware, the more time, the more it will start to get quieter and quieter and quieter, become alchemized or transformed into like gold. It can be the thing, the pathway to a breakthrough. I love the pendulum analogy as well, because I also see like that it's the same as the up and down, like, as we're saying as well, like the universal law kind of evolution in life is to also like be bypassy and not want to feel the pain, because there's that part of the ego, I think, too, that just wants to like not feel the deeper thing. And sometimes actually the victimization is also an excuse not to feel the deeper thing. It's like you kind of stay on one level and like tell that story, or like feed that story, but like going into the deeper thing that really like is at the core, or that is really, which we're often not even aware of, but like it takes practice or awareness or processes to like get down there and feel that. And then the like victimhood, like the kind of victimhood filter then is removed, because um like the deeper layers are kind of like addressed, whereas like the victimhood, um what did I call it, lens, like becomes like a kind of protection. So it's like the bypassing is like one part of the shadow, and then the victimization is one part of the shadow, to avoid the deeper thing. You know what I mean? Like to avoid going there. But once we go there and really grieve and really acknowledge and really process and really gain awareness, then we can come into the liberation phase of things. And yeah, I feel like I want to ground this a little bit more, and I want to give an example of, because I actually, yeah, I think I need to give more examples. I think that would help people to feel like it's not so bypassy. So let's say, for example, like me, my life, and you can relate to this. Um, I graduated at the top of my class with my master's degree. I overfunctioned, I stressed, I had to prove something to myself, to the world. As a Black woman, I felt like I had to work extra hard to prove myself. That's why I made sure I got, the top grades. And, but actually, that was really like, in some ways, it was not healthy. Like, yeah, I did prove something. I proved that I could, in university, follow all the rules really well, think really critically, blah, blah, blah. But that's like within, you know, that's within a certain type of system and framework, which, you know, formal education is a very privileged thing. It's a very, you know, historically, it has uh, a certain theme to it. I don't know. I don't know what word to use, but it has a certain place in society. And I started to realize, like, okay, I did that and I proved myself. And, you know, my stress and all these things were a product, like a byproduct of that. And so now I kind of see, like, well, it's beautiful that I was able to have this opportunity. It's beautiful that I was able to do so well. But at the same time, I don't have anything to prove to anybody, and I don't have to go to university. I don't have to graduate at the top of the class to be worthy of anything. And what made me agree to the belief that I had to do that in order to be successful, in order to be worthy, in order to be respected. So that was me consenting to the narrative created by universities, by our society, that that's something that makes you more, for certain people, more respectable, right? So an example of like reclaiming that could be like, well, like feeling less identified with, or less like, less emphasis on like my purpose by what someone else's standards of what it means to be intelligent, or what, like, there are so many people in the world who are geniuses who, didn't go to university, and there are so many other ways that we can, express ourselves and apply our intelligence. And sorry, this is kind of like going on a tangent, but I guess my point being is like, we can, as like a sovereign being, you can choose to say, hey, I actually don't need to get a degree. I don't even need to maybe be a part of the systems that want me to have a degree. You know what I mean? Maybe the more people step away from that, the less that will be valued. Maybe the more we create other ways to, um, I mean, like, as entrepreneurs nowadays don't even need, a college degree. There are people who have become millionaires, who were clever about something that they felt in their heart was needed for society, and they created it, and it was inevitable, that it was going to be something that brought them abundance, that brought them, you know, respect, and I mean, even beyond respect, just like a, value or purpose, and so maybe I feel like a lot of the times people feel oppressed and feel, internalized oppression because they believe they have to conform to a particular way of doing things that is actually oftentimes outdated. Like it's maybe not even needed anymore, and that, like, again, when I say outdated, that also relates to where we're evolving to. Like when we start to think like, oh, well, maybe I want to become an entrepreneur instead of investing all this money in student loans and all this time, getting educated in the older way. Like maybe I'll, use Google now, and I can educate myself about these few different things, and I can maybe contribute to society in a way that's even more so because I have more time to focus on this than would if I was, getting a master's degree in this. And that's not to say that the education system, is completely obsolete or completely outdated, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Like there are these places where we can start to think beyond, um, any limitations that might have been inherited or projected or programmed around where we're limited. Like for example, like Black people, like there was a time when we couldn't go to university. There was a time when, you know and like now we look at things and now it's like, okay, you know people in the US could say, Black people could say they're oppressed because historically less Black people have had access to education and how that affects where we are today. And we can also say, oh well, wait, like now we live in a society where education isn't as much of a guarantee or a requirement for a full-time job, for a salary, for being able to live a livelihood that feels good. So there are lots of different ways that, though that's a reality, we're still healing from the times when that wasn't available. And there's still a lot of people who, you know not having access to certain things have been limited. And there's also ways now that, even though that's true, we can find ways to, new ways, maybe even more exciting ways, maybe even more aligned ways. Like I would say that it's probably even a blessing, to have this, like, uh, this moment, this opportunity to be in a position where you're thinking in different ways. And again, like I'm kind of repeating myself, but I don't know if it was clear, because that's like how evolution happens too in some ways, saying like, oh wait, like I am not going to raise my kids to say you have to go to university. You know what I mean? Like I might raise my kids now saying like, oh well, you know you don't have to work extra hard to prove to teachers, because they have a bias toward you that you're Black, that you might not know, or might not be that smart. So you don't have to try even harder to prove to your teacher that you're, worthy of it. Like you can just use Google, and maybe you'll have more of an insight or an aha moment, or maybe you travel somewhere in the world and you like have an experience that's profound beyond anything in a university that you might have learned in a university, that will change your life and will bring abundance and a new perspective that's going to be valuable to humanity. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many different avenues that we can now start to explore, and we're still catching up with, like, like the trauma. The thing about trauma sometimes is that like it's like it's like it's like we're on a delay almost.
Mm.
It's like we have to catch up, like, and when I say catch up, I don't mean pressure wise, but it's like, so we got all the tools now to do new things, but we're still healing in some ways. So from what happened before, you know what I mean? So there's this kind of like both, this simultaneous thing that's happening as we go from as we evolve.
Yeah. But I really love what you're sharing in terms of, we basically get to decide what we subscribe to. Like, do we want to unsubscribe from this? Do we want to unlearn this? And then sometimes, though, like you mentioned, we don't even know we're subscribing to something. We don't know that we're limiting ourselves. So I think if people can look to where they're feeling bitter or jaded or held back or limited in some way, unmotivated, incompetent, we can start looking at those areas and asking yourself, what am I subscribing to that's maintaining this? What am I choosing to believe that's maintaining this? Because that's that awareness piece that's going to help bring about a lot of those shifts that will happen very naturally and organically, uh, as we ask questions, as we have a profound experience. Because I tend to see it like, it's almost like we have all these sort of upper superficial layers of conditioning, but there's a lot of like that ingrained sediment stuff, kind of like the bottom of the ocean that just sits there. And until we, do a lot of meditation and yoga and a lot of space, kind of, whatever your thing is, breath, sound, this, that, or the other, or until we've asked a lot of questions and contemplating, maybe read some books, until we have had a breakthrough. Some of us, it's a profound spiritual awakening. It all happens at once. It's very difficult for that sediment to be broken up, to bring space, to bring awareness, because we don't know until we know. So oftentimes we don't even know to ask these questions. But I know this group who is watching now or replay will certainly have some level of awareness. It's like pointing at those places where, again, you feel limited, held down, held back, upset, angry, and asking myself, what am I currently subscribing to that's perpetuating this? Because that's where you can find those deeper agreements and subscriptions to the greater cultural conditioning, to the societal rules, to the societal norms. Even down to, I think when you were even sharing, it was reminding me even of like that feminist wave, because it's like some things even appear to be good that aren't, right? Well, aren't. That's my judgment, everybody. You'll see why. Let me give you the context. Is because I am a feminist in that I agree that all people are equal. I think we should value all beings equally. So to that degree, I would say I subscribe to that. However, what feminism brought a lot of sort of married, middle-aged women in the U.S. was this semblance of freedom that just became more obligation, because now they're not only provider, they're also the child rearer and the one doing the household managing. So they're doing all the things and playing all the roles, wearing all the hats. So they thought it would be freedom, but it turned out to be more obligation. And so again, even something that appears to be liberating might not always be liberating. So again, you have to ask yourself, what am I upholding? What am I adhering to? What am I telling myself I have to do, looking at the society piece, cultural piece, conditioning piece, to see where we're being held down, or even what's causing, like, even the motherhood. If I'm having a rough day, it's like, what am I believing? Well, a lot of that is me feeling like I'm a victim to my own son, which then I'm like, well, wait a second, that makes no sense. So then sometimes it's so simple. But I would say in the beginning, it's more difficult to create more space and awareness to break through that confinement where your ego really believes these things are all true. However, so, like, just basic practices. I know for me, it's maybe been 15 years of different kinds of spiritual practice and study. At first it was going to workshops and seminars, and then it was reading books, and then it was working with mentors and teachers and medicine people and working with energy practitioners. So your journey can look any which way, but as you go, it's going to start cracking that sediment, that ingrained conditioning, those ingrained belief systems, even those lodged emotions and all that, whatever the energetic framework is in the body that kind of holds on to all this stuff. And then guess what's going to happen? A lot of that old stuff's going to come up. You're going to become aware, and you're going to become aware of like what you talked about, DaniElle, which I think is important, that core wounding piece. Because I feel like a lot of people, I'll share my experience briefly. Um, I had the overworking, overcompensating, overdoing in school and in work very similarly. I also was the kind of gal that would like throw myself at guys like, oh, if you just love me and I'll love you until the end of time. It doesn't matter how toxic you are, I will love you. And how else did this show up? I mean, it showed up in a number of ways in my life, right? And if I'm just looking at the superficial, I'm gonna I'm gonna be like, okay, I have some insecurities, or okay, I'm kind of just proving my worth. And so that's helpful, right? That's the beginning. But then you start after a while traveling down to that more core wounding, that sediment again, where now you're at the beginning, maybe you're at the top of the ocean, now you're kind of diving down, laying around, finding some debris and stuff. Then you hit upon that sediment where it's like, oh my gosh, I've always felt unaccepted, and because I was the black sheep of my own family, and because I was bullied in school. So then you hit upon that. And then most people's core wounding then goes to unworthiness and goes to separation or death. Like, it's all the same. Yeah. And again, it's like there's something that is like, what is that? Even liberating, I think, in that revelation, that ultimately we all have like these same core root wounds. There's something liberating about that it's not, wait, this doesn't mean something about me personally. Like, I'm not just the bad guy or the reject or whatever. Like, this, we all are kind of walking on this journey, and emotions is the great equalizer too. And so yeah, I like you spoke to the core wounding. That's what came up for me, is like helping people see too how we might see the superficial stuff, but ultimately it'll lead us to that deeper sediment. And when that stuff starts being lifted, those big ego structures, like a big ego structure for me lately that I even pointed out to you was well, I didn't tell you the detail, but it was like I think for a long time, I actually believed that there was like a right answer, or that there was someone who was going to be right. There was one right perspective. Like, I don't think I even knew that consciously, that that's what I thought, but that has driven so much of my behavior and relationships, interaction, exchanges, communication. And lately that's been lifting almost to the point where, like, I don't even know what I believe anymore. And you go through, but that's a huge layer for me that's been so, it's been a little bit difficult to move through, and yet also so empowering and liberating, because I'm like, oh wait, that all of that is being freed, and it opens you up to totally new perspectives, totally new awareness and embodiment and self-love, and on, right? I feel like there's so much we could say about that too. But I think those were like the main things that were coming up when you were sharing too, that even things that we think are going to be freeing that society hands us, here, take the red pill or whatever, oftentimes, you got to decide for yourself, what's limiting or not. And then taking a look at that core wounding to really help break up that inner sediment, because that's where you're going to start finding that deeper freedom. Because people want to feel different, I feel like, they want to feel better. That starts happening when that sediment is lifted.
Yes. Amazing analogies and explanations. Like, I agree 100% with everything that you said. I love that you use the feminism as an example. I mean, like, that's like, I feel like that's like a huge evolutionary example of like, and sometimes like we will think things will be liberating and only to find out that maybe they are not. Maybe for some they are, but maybe for others they're not. And but yeah, I feel like that was a movement. There's the matriarchy, one pendulum swing, patriarchy, one pendulum swing. Within patriarchy comes feminism out of this, you know, patriarchal programming to then want to be, in this like workforce, like energy, leading to the over functioning, leading to, all of these like things. And so that's, I feel like that's another part of the evolutionary process. And then realizing, oh wait, now we're back to like reclaiming the goddess, in like, that's a thing now, because instead of like the kind of feminist empowerment approach, there's the like, goddess, divine feminine, like empowerment coming along. And then like we're moving into this center, this balanced way, like as the pendulum just keeps swinging back and forth, within the macro and the micro levels. So love that. I love your um what else was it that you had an example of? I mean, yeah, everything you said, and you said it so clearly, but so I guess I don't need to respond to all of the things. Um, and yeah, so when we begin to identify like the deeper core wounds of like of why we are consenting, like why we want to receive a validation or external recognition, oftentimes within a system, and why we consent to that system, getting to the deeper roots of why can then allow us to see maybe we aren't truly aligned at a soul level with the ways we've wanted to fit in or be accepted, um, and then we can find an authentic expression, an authentic truth that can start to come forth. And it takes courage to do that, right? Because of course we want to be safe, we want to fit in, we want to succeed, we want validation. And then sometimes the soul level authentic truth is not what's commonly revered or celebrated. And so that often takes a lot of courage. But again, the way I like to frame it always is like, and I think it helps people to have the courage, is it's like it's an evolutionary thing, like we're the leaders, we're the new earth. I love that it's like a year since our new earth summit last year that we're coming back together. But like we're the leaders. So digging deep, finding the authentic truth, healing the core wounds to break free from the limitations of the conditions of the programming is evolution. And like it's so interesting because it happens even like on a biological level. Like you said, people want to feel different. I feel like actually the different feeling has to do with the body. It has to do with the physiology. It has to do with the DNA. It has to do with the brain functioning. Like it's actually a biological evolutionary phenomenon of what we're talking about: healing, liberation, all of it. So what was another example of it? There was something that you brought up that I was like, oh, that's so perfect. Not the feminism, nice. Anyway, it'll probably come to me, but yeah. So this is the work, um, and I feel like as it is an evolutionary thing as well, there are some people who are here who are like asking the questions and who are kind of ready for this next thing, and there's some people, like you said, sometimes it's just so deep you're not aware of it. Some people just are totally not aware, and that's okay too. There's no need to like make everybody aware and like da 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 da. It's a process. So there are those who are drawn to our work, who are drawn to this message today, who are hearing it and receiving it, who are ready to go there, who are uh, ready for this evolutionary catalyst. And yeah, and it's all beautiful wherever we are, wherever whatever stage we're in. um, it's just really beautiful to witness everybody and all the different places that we are. So I feel like I can't remember the other thing that I wanted to respond to, but we got a like there.
Yeah.
Love it, love it. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, if anybody has any comments who's watching, I mean, I think that there's only one person, but no pressure. Please say something if you feel. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say in response to what I said.
Hmm. Well, I think, as we sort of near the conclusion of the talk, what what I like to do, and if you're open to it, so, is like share like a tool or a practice that you might be using lately, like the kind of grounds, like you said, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. I know for me, like a tool that I've been using as of late, it always changes. My practice always evolves. It's going to evolve as my awareness evolves, as I do, and so on and so forth. But lately, when I find myself in the space of the inner victim, we'll say, and I have no connotation about victim. I know there's a lot out there in online communities and such where that's like a buzzword or it's a bad word or it's a trendy word or whatever. And I don't associate or subscribe to any of those connotations. I'm just using it so we can all understand each other. But when I know I'm in the space of my inner victim, that's also usually the space of my inner child, because my inner child is the part of me that can be harmed. It's really not my empowered adult. My empowered adult is pretty solid on maintaining an empowered perspective. So when I am feeling victimized, I go in, I recognize, oh, wait, this is my inner child. First of all, as soon as you recognize it's your inner child, for me, maybe not the case for everybody, I'm able to immediately offer a little bit more warmth, tenderness, compassion to myself, like a wave of a shift of energy already happens for me as it is. Then the next piece, this isn't always natural and it isn't always easy. And sometimes it takes regular practice. But eventually I find that after I'm just, all it takes is that recognition, that awareness in the moment. Eventually I find myself in a position to be able to feel almost separate from or different from that inner child. And a lot of people call this bypassing when I brought it up online. And I'm like, this for me has been a huge part of my healing process. If I'm always in my inner victim and inner child, first of all, I'm a mess. I'm probably emotionally reactive, hostile, trying to attack and accuse people, blame and shame. So it's like as soon as I can shift, well enough, I find that I can own a different perspective. And that's where I'm in a position to sort of reparent that part of myself. So whether it's, okay, what do you really need? Like, what's the need here? And help address that need. Whether it's supporting um, the inner child or the inner victim and channeling that energy in some way, in a healthier way or more holistic or, serving or loving way. Sometimes it's like, you just gotta go work out or go for a run. Sometimes it's journaling it out. Sometimes it's letting that voice be heard. Sometimes it's setting a boundary, but it's going to that place within you to even see it first and foremost as like inner child, go to the inner victim, basically the part of us that feels victimized, recognizing it's the inner child. And then eventually, after I do a little bit of that, I find I can own a different perspective. And I'm kind of looking at myself from a more empowered point of view, and I'm able to support that part of myself into a greater mature place. And that's been helping me lately just by asking what it needs, supporting myself, offering myself. Sometimes it's just telling myself the words I want to hear. It's
Mm.
okay, you don't have to do it all. It's not all on your shoulders, whatever. And that's been supporting me lately to free up a lot of that energy and a lot of those identifications with the inner victim slash inner child that feels so disempowered, that feels so taken from and victimized, on and on. And slowly and surely, you of course find that you no longer own those perspectives. It's almost like that child grows up.
Yeah, amazing. Very, very helpful. It's really good to hear your process and your awareness and how you move through that. Let me see. For me, I would say the way that I open myself to more awareness is that I actually have this practice. Um, I don't know if you know, I work with plant medicine. I work with like ayahuasca, and like as a plant ally, I'm very much in service to ayahuasca, and myself and working with others. And um, yeah, it's fascinating because it works in a way where plants are oftentimes a direct experience of consciousness that can shift your awareness, that can shift your DNA even, because the plants directly have access to the code, the keys, the like key information to like unlock different things in your being and in your body. So that's one thing. So from my experience working with grandmother ayahuasca, she's also an ancestor and has all this information and wisdom from evolution, from the beginning of time all the way, to now and the future. But it's given me this practice, and I mean, I experienced it first in a ceremony, but this experience of divine love, of the love of God, of the love of Goddess, of this infinite, universal, unconditional love. So my practice has been to daily tune into that frequency. And it's beautiful because I think you can tune into the frequency without experiencing it during a plant medicine ceremony. However, the feeling just became so familiar, like I knew it. And the knowing of it has allowed me to return to it without plant medicine in my daily practice. And so my practice consists of receiving the energy that is love and light, and being filled with that energy, and the energy then alchemizing, like even on an unconscious subconscious level, the core wounds, because that love actually is strong enough to alchemize and penetrate these wounds. And with that, like being in communion with that love as much as possible, like just sitting in meditation as well, but also it comes into other parts of my life, in my consciousness, more regularly, and I find that these moments still come up, of course, of like being triggered, and of, there's still unconscious things that are wanting to be integrated within myself as far as wounding goes. And the more I'm able to kind of bask in this love and this frequency and this awareness of that love, the less powerful or the less present or the less persistent these these actions or reactions from wounding are. So they become less common, they become less yeah, just less powerful the more that this particular practice has been woven in. And like you said, I've been through the mentorship and and workshops and classes and practices and trainings and everything like that. And this so far has been for me the most profound practice in my life. And again, it's I mean, for me, my journey is working with plant medicine, and I know that it's not everybody's journey. I don't feel like everybody is meant to have that. Um, I do feel like somehow a direct transmission from plant energy and information in my body is like for me powerful, because it's a direct, like, it's like my consciousness is communicating to me versus like a teacher outside of me teaching me how to access my consciousness. It's like a, just like a, you know what I mean, like a direct consciousness awareness maker or expander. um so it doesn't have a filter of like a human translating a practice or an information like I'm doing now. Like I'm a human communicating this thing, whereas it's also something that can just be experienced directly through plants or not. But you know, it takes time. You know, like sometimes with spiritual teachings or books or things like that, it makes sense on a mental level, but like, does it actually land in the body? And I feel like that's where, you know, the wounding and the traumas too, like, live somehow and can be transformed if they're integrated and embodied on a physical level, as well. And like, I'm not saying this is the only way. I just am sharing that this is the way that has been most effective for me. So yeah, that's just an example of my process and awareness and an evolution, and allowing the soul to really come in and be present without the the kind of distortions or filters of like the wounding and the ego. It's like a clear, I become then a more clear vessel from being full and filled with this kind of divine love. So yeah, it's an evolutionary thing. It's an evolutionary thing.
Mhm. It's beautiful, that practice, the medicine of plant medicine. And I mean, clearly, if we can just go straight to God, why would we not? I
Yeah,
mean, let's
right.
just go to the source. Why bother with all this other stuff? And I mean, I'm kidding. Clearly, everyone's practices and tools, I mean, is great. I don't use plant medicines, but it's like, if you can use that to access it directly, why not? Especially if that's your path and that's what you're inclined toward. And what you're sharing, I mean, that is the medicine. I mean, it's actually the only medicine, the only truth, right? If there is one truth or one medicine, it's going to be unconditional love. It's going to be that isness, that suchness. I know in general, what do they call them? Oh, peak experiences. I think it's like a term. And the reason I'm sharing that is because a lot of people awaken through peak experiences, number one, and a lot of people heal through peak experiences because of everything that you're sharing. You are able to access the body directly, and you're supported with the consciousness to shift energy and to bring about necessary awareness. And to the degree that it's almost like it knows what needs to occur, there's an intelligence with it that, like you said, maybe not every tool in our tool bag or human mentor can offer. So there's
Right.
incredible value in that and beauty. And I want to let people know too, in terms of accessing unconditional love, knowing that it is, of course, like the main primary, like the first medicine. Like, let's go there, right? You can access those states in meditation. You can access those states in yoga. There are a million and one ways to access those states that then over time can permeate through the body and into that sediment and those core wounds and stuff like that. With that said, the peak experiences, so I've heard, or at least read upon, and also heard from other people, just like you said, once they experience it, now they know the feeling and the frequency, and they're able to tap into it more consistently. So I think that's the key there, that it's something you get to carry with you.
Yeah.
And then it's something that is easy to, like, okay, I know how to enter into that frequency now. Because I can meditate for a year and experience a peak experience maybe 3 times, or oftentimes you'll carry it with you for a while, 6, 8 weeks, but then you'll notice it'll kind of dim, dim, dim. And then you might require, we'll say, I don't know if we ever actually require, but oftentimes as humans we do, maybe another experience or great meditation. And I'm never suggesting that we go seeking those things out, because that's part of it too, right? It just comes naturally. These experiences will come. We can trust that they come, and that's honestly who we are. And if we would let go of half of the shit, our subscriptions to all of our stories, we'd be experiencing that all the time. That's really the whole point of this talk. If we
Right.
weren't so caught up in our own stories and our own victimhood, to sort of tie it all together, that kind of experience would be available to us always in all of our moments. And it is here right now.
It is. It definitely is. It certainly is. Beautifully said. I agree with all of that. Yeah, yeah. And another thing that's helpful, and I know that you also do this work with the clients and with the people that you work with, but the same here is it's like another beautiful gift is like once you started to embark on this path and like started to like tap into the deeper layers within yourself, I find it's easier to witness it in other people before they are aware. And the beautiful art of coaching and of healing that we practice is seeing that in people and then like helping people to see that within themselves and to reach that point and to gain awareness within themselves. So that's also something that is helpful, is to like share. I feel, oh, now I remember what I wanted to say. Sharing our like our biggest challenges, right? Like we can see patterns, and in the coaching session, for example, someone will share what it is that they're struggling with, and being having experienced this awareness within myself, I can see the deeper layers, because like you said, they're very common. Like our core wounds are very, very common. So when someone can express a challenge that they're facing, I feel like us knowing that within ourselves as coaches, as healers, we can guide people to, yeah, to that awareness within themselves. Not saying that we know per se exactly what, or all the details, or that we're projecting something onto, the people that we're working with, but that we can say like, okay, there's something deeper here. You know what I mean? Like we can keep encouraging them to find the deeper thing and to get to the very core, to then, feel into that and sit with that, and to be able to go there. It's a place that a lot of people are like not even aware that they're resistant of, but like having someone else kind of go there with them and kind of help to light the way and feel into the places that are a little bit scary to go to is really powerful. So I think that's also something that you and I are, really here to do, and to really hold space for people in that. And of course, there's no pressure with that either. It's a process. It's an unfolding. But as people who have gone there, I feel like, and I feel like no matter what, like you can always benefit from having someone go there with you, no matter how far along you have gone, or how experienced you are with going into these deeper realms and deeper layers of our consciousness and of our shadows to be integrated. I feel like, yeah, it's always helpful to have someone else to be able to support that in a loving, compassionate, patient way. But yeah, like knowing, okay, there are people who can see it and can understand it, and just like really hold space for that deeper thing and encourage that process. Yeah.
And I love that you said that, because, and I don't know if I agree with this, but I love that it was said in a book like a long time ago. I couldn't even tell you who it is. I could put it in the comments later if somebody cares. But they were actually proposing that healing, and dare I even say this, right? It is kind of like it would be like a hot topic, or controversial, I guess, to say, but they said it can only happen with someone else, healing. And I found that to be so interesting, because they said we require a witness. Now, they did say that, of course, we are always witness, right? Source, creator, God, cosmos, spirit, universe. So um, we're always witness. There's that. But they were saying there always has to be another person. And it even comes down to something so simple as, I don't know if you guys are aware, and it's kind of like a side topic, but we are concluding, I promise. There's this
Mhm.
thing called Focus Mate, and it's this accountability app. And all it is someone else co-working with you virtually on the phone. And I've been loving that. It's crazy how different work is, or meditation, or whatever, when you just have someone else witnessing you. Like
Right,
that's it. They're just
right.
showing up. There's no agenda. Like this is someone random from around the world. I mean, you do get to know them obviously briefly, but it's like they're watching you and it changes everything. Now I can somehow dive into depth meditation even further. Now I'm actually staying focused on my tasks. Now I'm doing what I said I was going to do. So it's incredible how simple but profound. Just another pair of eyes, or another human witness is for our journeys in general, and especially when you start diving into some of these other areas like personal growth and healing. Well, shoot, if Focus Mate can help me with accountability, imagine what happens when it comes to healing.
Yes, yes. It's so special. I mean, like even having these conversations like with you and I together, there's like a certain magic, that comes like, I mean, of course there's a magic that comes if you're doing a live stream on your own and I'm doing a live stream by myself, but there's still something different that would happen. I mean, I guess that's when I say it out loud, it sounds like it's obvious, but there's something about the how like the co-creative energy or something that um sparks something. I don't know. When I'm
The
saying this, it
synergy,
sounds like
the synergy, right? Is that what
the
you're going for?
synergy.
The
Yeah,
synergy.
yeah. There's just something. I feel like maybe there aren't any words for it, and yeah, it's hard to express, but there's something there. I mean, I've read somewhere also, and I think there's like a famous quote, and I don't remember it correctly, but it has something to do with like I don't know. Actually, I can't remember it now. Sorry.
It's okay. I think the gal who did my quote that I'm thinking, it's Marion Woodman. I think it was her. And I was like, what? So who
Yeah.
knows? I think it's her. Hopefully it's the right source I'm giving credit to. But thank you, DaniElle, so much for this amazing, profound, deep, comprehensive talk. I mean, such a gift. Really appreciate you being here, and everyone else who was able to join today. And of course, we'll do it again.
Yeah, let's definitely. I loved it. Love the conversation. Thank you for those who tuned in and commented, and for those who will be watching the replay. Let us know. Enter hashtag replay if you made it to the end, if you appreciate this message. Yeah, let us know what you think. Share it with anybody that you think could benefit. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. To our evolution.
To our evolution. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Errity.
Love
Thank you
you
so
all.
much.
Yes, you as well.
Have a beautiful day.
You too. And to all.